Hey y'all, and welcome to Skyrim Scripting. On this episode, we're focusing on JSON files. How very exciting, right? Well, actually, it kind of is. JSON files are very, very simple to work with, both as the text file themselves, which we'll look at in a moment, and the code that interacts with them. We just need to get you up and running with it. And then you can do whatever you want with it, but there are a couple of use cases that modders often use JSON files for. So let me tell you about those use cases. We're going to implement one of them in this episode. But first, let's take a quick look at what JSON is. So here, I just went to the Wikipedia page. I guess I'm in the way. Let me step out of the way for a second and drink my tea. Have a read. I want to drink my tea. It's kind of cold. I've been recording all day. It's not bad. I might pause during our creation kit tutorial stuff and make new tea. So basically it stores stuff. It's a text file that stores stuff. Let me show you what the text normally looks like down here. And to take a look at that, it's basically just some curly braces, some brackets, some double quotes, and some colons. And commas. It's got commas. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. I'm almost ready. Okay, let's do this thing. You ready for this? Let's do it. So what might you use these things for? Well, you can put whatever you want into JSON files, and it's really useful. If in your mod you just have some like integers and strings and forms and floats or whatever that you want to store somewhere and have them around between different save games, maybe even have them around for all of the players' gaming profiles and characters, you can save these files. You can save these files and they're really, really easy to save. So the two ways that I normally see it used are one, in mod configuration menus, SkyUI MCMs. Often you'll see mods that have import and export functionality in their MCM menus. So when you see this, what it normally is doing behind the scenes is creating a JSON file. So your users, your player, can go in, configure all of your widgets, the sliders, the drop-downs, do a bunch of configuration, and then they can hit export. That saves a file on disk, like in your data folder, in the player's data folder. And then they can open up a different character, a different save game. They can open up that menu again and hit import. And then it will import the settings from disk that were saved. So that's a really easy way for them to store some data and load it up. It's like configuration data between all the different playthroughs across all the different characters. They could even have different files for each, like for a group of characters, whatever. It's totally unlimited, whatever you want to do with that. The other way that I normally see this scene used, which we are going to do in this episode, is when integrating with other mods. So when you make your mod, you should be thinking about what other common mods are out there that I could integrate my mod with, so that when my player uses mod A and mod B, or mod A or B, whatever, with my mod, I can do some extra functionality to make it more powerful and make the gaming experience even better. So often when you integrate with other mods, you need to know about stuff in the mod. You might want to know about the mod's spells. You might want to know some of their weapons, some of their armor, some of their, I don't know, NPCs. What you can do is in a configuration file, or just whatever you want to call this file, in a JSON file, you could store a list of all of the forms that you're interested in. That means all of the NPCs, all of the weapons, all of the armor, all of the spells, all of the whatever items in a JSON file. And then in your game, just reference that. So what we're going to do in this episode is we're going to create a mod where when the player has certain mods installed, we're going to look at ones for swords and maybe spells if we have time. What we'll do is we'll give the player a random sword from that mod. We'll be like, cool, we noticed you have mod A installed. Here's a cool sword from it. Ta-da! So we'll gift them stuff. So it's a good example, I feel like, of a use case, but first we'll start with the basics. And the way that we're going to deal with JSON files entirely is using my favorite mod. Now, some folks who've watched my series may know what my favorite mod is already, and it is JsonUtil. Ta-da! I love this mod. Oh my god, thank you, Exiled Viper. There's the name right there for making this. You are my hero. Just like Joel Day, who made the Visual Studio Code extension and who also made the Papyrus debugger and logger, and Fire, who made Pyro. Y'all are my heroes. Really, I don't know if I would be here modding if it weren't for y'all and your tools. So JsonUtil lets you do a number of things, but one of the things is working with JSON files. So we'll download that. I'm going to go through a number of potential mods. We're going to download JsonUtil. That's the only one you need for this episode. We'll use it to use JsonUtil, which allows us to read and write from JSON files. So that's all you need. But in the episode, we are going to install some mods that have some random items in it that we're going to give the player. So here's some sword mods I found. This one adds some like daggers and swords and stuff. This one adds 2 swords, which I thought would be really useful and easy. And we'll probably use add item menu in the game to add these swords to the player. Then we'll use JsonUtil to put those swords, put the representation of those swords into a JSON file so that you can see what the JSON file looks like, which later, afterwards, you can hand edit. But we wanted you to see what it looks like first. Yeah, and then optionally, if you want to do this episode with spells instead of items, instead of add item menu, you could use add spell menu. And so, for example, there's some spells here that just add a couple of teleport spells to the game. And we could also do the exact same thing and detect if this is enabled. And if it is, give the player some random spells. Whatever. Now, add item menu and add spell menu both require UI extensions. I think both work without SkyUI, but I'm going to go ahead and turn SkyUI on. And then the spell one also requires Papyrus extender, which requires, I think, address library. So I'm just going to turn all these things on. Here's address library. Here's Power of Theory's Papyrus extender, which adds spell menu uses. Here's some random spells, just some spells. Cool. Here's the spell menu adder. Cool. Cool, we got all that stuff. We don't need that. UI extensions. Install it with Vortex or Mod Organizer too. Add item menus, what I'm gonna get. I guess I have to click yes. I'm going to get these swords, whatever. I'm just getting a bunch of stuff. Getting all kinds of stuff. All kinds of stuff. And JsonUtil. This is the only one that you need. And it requires SKSE. It is an SKSE plugin, which adds some Papyrus functions, which I will get to making some screencasts on how to do that. I'm still trying to get through recording a bunch of these, and then I'll focus on C++. I don't know what this nonsense is. Refresh. I don't know what that's all about. Let me just click and install on all these things. Cool, we installed a bajillion things. We got all those mods, but we need to make our own mods. So let's do that. I don't want to get in the way of the screen, so before I forget, I'm just gonna go small. Boop. That is my go small sound. That is my boop and my boop. That's what I do. And so go ahead and open up Creation Kit. I'm going to go ahead and just make an empty mod. You can do this however you want, called Gimme Gimme, because it's going to give us stuff. Gimme, gimme, gimme. And I'm going to use Mod Organizer 2 to tell Creation Kit to save all of his files there. But you don't have to. You can do this however you want to. So let me boot up CK. And what we're going to do, first we'll save this. We're just going to make a spell that when we run it, we'll run some script, and that way we can easily play with PapyrusUtil to save some stuff to JSON files, and then we'll look at them, and then we'll update the script, and so on and so forth. So we're going to make a spell. Before we do that, let's make the magical effect to apply to the spell. Otherwise, I'm totally going to forget to attach it to the spell. That's what I did the last take of this video, and it crashed the game, and I got frustrated. So we're going to call this gimme spell effect. We'll associate with a spell. I'm just going to call it gimme. It's going to be a fire and forget because we're just going to trigger it. And so instead of concentration, it's fire and forget, and it needs a magic skill, otherwise the player won't see it in their spell list. Close that and reopen it so that we can attach a papyrus script to it. I'll just call that gimme spell effect script once this loads. Gimme spell effect script. Lovely. And throughout the screencast, what you'll be doing a lot is you'll be editing this file. So right click, edit source. This is where you're going to live. And actually, while we're here, if you want to, we can go ahead and put something in there. This is what I already wrote up. So here's the gimme spell effect script. And if you want to, you can just put on effect start in there and just put a debug message box so that when we cast the spell, we can see that it works. So if you want to, you can just put that into your little box, Control S. Cool, and we're going to update this code as we go to have some PapyrusUtil stuff in it. So now let me make the actual spell that our user will get. I'll just call it gimme spell. Just call it gimme. It'll be a fire and forget, and we'll add the effect that we just made. Great, fantastic. Now I'm just going to use a quest script really quickly so we can use a quest alias to give the player that spell at the start of the game, so we don't have to do that manually. So I'm going to say new quest, gimme quest. We've done all this before. If any of this is new to you, check out my beginner basics series. So quest alias, new reference alias, player ref, it's ref, fill type specific reference, select forced reference, cell any, and it should populate player ref. Now we don't need a player script for this episode, but we will use the alias spells to add our spell so that the player will get that at the start of the game. And now we're kind of ready. We can actually go ahead and run the game. I'm going to close CK because I'm using Mod Organizer 2 and I've got to run the game. But you can keep this open and just stay in this edit source box. This is where we're going to code. So let me close out of this and we'll boot up the game. Now, reminder, because this requires SKSE, run the game with SKSE. And I guess I could just hang out with you while it loads. I'm just going to go to Riverwood and make sure the spell does something. So CSU Riverwood. And we should have the spell. Gimme. Cool deal. Cool, and it says hello, which is great. Now let's just save a little bit of JSON. Let's look at what's available in PapyrusUtil and just try something out. So I don't remember if I asked you to. Did I ask you to manually download PapyrusUtil? If I didn't, go back to PapyrusUtil. You downloaded it with the mod manager. Fantastic. But go ahead and also manually download it because we want to look at the files inside of it. So go ahead and download it. I've already done that, but I'll delete the previous one. Cool. And go ahead and extract that. And what we'll be doing is we're going to be looking inside this and looking at its script source and looking at all these PSC files, because those Papyrus source code files are where all the documentation for this exists. So I'm just going to open up this whole folder in code. You can open up those files individually. And what we'll see is there's a JsonUtil, a MISCUtil, a PapyrusUtil, a StorageUtil, and some other things. I think Actor and Object are both maybe deprecated. Actor's not. It's great. You can override packages. And Object, I think, doesn't work for Special Edition. But we're going to look at JsonUtil. and it says mod authors read. These functions will do some stuff, and this is where the JSON files will get saved. And here's how you can change where they get saved. Apparently you can load or save the files by hand, but you don't need to, because they'll get loaded when the player loads the game, and they'll get saved when the player saves the game. There's a bunch of stuff, and then down here there's just a ton of functions, without necessarily documentation, but we'll look at what a number of them do, and once you learn a couple of them, a number of them are pretty easy to figure out. Like one lets you set an integer, and one lets you unset an integer. So let's actually see what that does right now. Let me open up the code in Visual Studio. Okay, so I've got our effect script opened up. This is what you should have open up in Creation Kit, and we can make it do stuff. So we're going to use JsonUtil, so we can use this as a reference if we want to, the JsonUtil file. I'm just going to use auto-completion and just say something like JsonUtil dot and look at what's available. So let's see what happens when we add a string to a JSON file. So let's look at string set string value. Let's see what that does. Looks like it takes the name of a file, so a file name, that makes sense, and then you give it a key and a value. So you just set this kind of arbitrary key and value, and it'll put it in this file name. The file is owned by your mod unless you share it with other mods, like give them the same path or something. So you can put whatever you want in as a key. You don't have to like prefix it with your mod name if you don't want to. So we'll just say set string value. Let's say the file name is string file name, because we'll use this a number of times. Gimme.json. Cool, I quit the game because that background noise may have been annoying. Gimme.json, and so we'll pass file name and then just a key and a value, and these are both strings. So like whatever, the key and then some value, and we'll see what it looks like. And we could also do this for integers, floats, and forms. So while we're here, we'll set an int value, a float value, and a form value. So this needs an integer, so we'll just say like 42. This needs a float, so we can just say like 42 or 4.2. And this needs a form, so where are we then going to get a form? Well, the caster, the actor, is a form. So let's just try that. And now we would need to perform a save game to save this file. So I'm going to manually save it by saying JsonUtil.save and then the file name. Cool. And then if we want to, we can debug.messagebox, or I'll just do notification, saved, and file name. Cool. Let me boot up the game again and we'll run the spell. Before I do that though, let me tell you that this is going to show up in your data folder. So this will show up for y'all Vortex folks in Skyrim Special Edition data. It's going to show up in an SKSE plugins like storage util something folder. For y'all Mod Organizer 2 folks, don't forget that this is actually going to get written to your overwrite directory. So you go to settings, paths, and find the path to your overwrite directory. I've customized mine, but you should look at wherever that is, because that's where the files are going to show up for us Mod Organizer 2 folks. All right, let me boot up the game. Okay, let's try the spell. It says saved gimme JSON. Let's go to our file system. So for y'all Vortex folks, where you're going to find it is in data/skse/plugins/storageutil/gimme JSON. And if we open this up, here's what we'll see. Now we stored a float, we stored a form, we stored an integer, and we stored a string. If we go back in here and we store like 2 of each of these, some value 2, we could give them different key names is what we need to do. The key 2, the key 2, 423, the key 2. I'll just do one, sure, I can do 2 of the player. I don't have any other form handy. And I'll save, and I'll go into the game, and you can run reload script, gimme spell effect script. And I'm going to cast this spell again, and I'm going to go back into our file. Where is it? Here. Here's our file. And so all of this floats go under float, all the forms and ints and strings go under that top level key. And so then you'll find your multiple keys underneath there. So like the key 2, and so on and so forth. Now these forms are in an interesting form. And that's what we're going to focus on in this episode because I think it's most interesting to folks. So if you can't tell already, the way that it stores forms is it has on the right the name of the master file or ESP or wherever the form is defined, and then separated by a pipe on the left hand side is the hexadecimal integer. So OX something. Really, really convenient. And very hand editable, as we'll see in the episode. So instead of there's a leaf blower coming around the corner. Let me pause and I'll figure out something to do. But we are going to look at lists, and then we're going to actually make the mod. Alright, BRB. I think it's gone. So y'all who've been watching for a while know that my favorite mod is JsonUtil, and y'all probably also know that the absolute bane of my screencasting existence is leaf blowers. There aren't that many leaves. Seriously, why are you here every other day? Oh my god. So let's look at lists, because you can put lists of things into JsonUtil, and let's also actually make the mod. There's one minor thing I want to call out because it can be an issue. We set all of these keys as capital T, capital K, and in the file, they all got lowercased. Now when you read them back out, if you try and read it with capitals, I've had it not return those things. So we'll try and use all lowercase for things. So just a note. So let's make lists of things because it supports lists of strings, ints, floats, and values. So let's say JsonUtil.stringlist. So there's all these different string list things. You can add to a string list, you can clear it, you can copy it, you can get the count of it, you can get the count of a specific value in it. When you add one, you can choose whether or not it's okay to add duplicates to the list. You can see if the list has one. I think get will give you, what does get do? I don't know what get does. What does get do? What does it take? Oh, you get a value at a specific index in the array. So there's all these cool things. So we're just going to add. Stringlist add, we give it the file name as always, and then we give it a key, a value, and as you can see, you can say whether or not you want to allow duplicate values with another argument. So we're just going to add a couple things to a list. We'll say my list, and we'll say string 1, string 2, string 3, string 4, frar. Whatever. And you can probably see what's going to happen if we do this with integers, just so that you can see what it looks like in the file. I'll do a int list add, file name, int list, or like some ints, 1, 42. I'll set int as float. Those will also work because ints are valid floats. And then finally forms. And I don't have multiple again, so I'll just do caster. And I'll change all of these ints to say some floats. And in this case, we do specify the same key name always. Otherwise, I'll show you, it'll make a separate list altogether. Totally different list. And this one will say some forms. Cool. Save. Control C, compile, and go into game. If you're already in game, you can just use reload script again. Reload script in the console. Reload script, gimme spell effect script. Oh, and just FYI, because we'll use it in the mod that we're going to make, I'm also going to download Apocalypse with all of its super duper cool spells, because I want more spells, and right now I only have one mod with spells. Alright, let's go into game. And we'll cast gimme. Cast it. It says save gimme. Let's look at what it did. Cool. We've got a we got floats like from before. We got a float list. So we said some floats was the key and it added 2 things to it, and then we made a totally different key and it did this. There's form list. So there's the player twice. And then there's oh, by default allow duplicate is true. We could have said allow duplicate false and it would only have 1 item. Int list, string list. So once you know these keys, there's really only 8 of them. Float list, form list, int list, string list. You can actually start writing these by hand, but the whole purpose of this is I'm going to show you how to add a bunch of stuff to this file using JsonUtil, so that then it's way easier for you to go back in and edit it. So I'm going to get rid of all this nonsense. And we can even delete the file if we want, but we'll keep it as is. What I want to do now when we cast a spell is I want to add all of the equipment we have and all the spells we have to lists so that they're in that file, so that we can use it to configure integration with other mods. So I installed add item menu and add spell menu, so they both come with these packs. So let's get the add item menu ones, let's get the spell menu ones, and let's grab some stuff from, these are items, so we want items from the steel swords. Let's get that again. So now let's get items from that other thing, Belsky swords. Cool. Just do swords. And now let's do the spell menu and we'll choose a mod, and for that one we'll get these teleport spells. Oh, that's super wrong. Oh, I didn't enable Papyrus Extender. Be right back. Alright, cool. Let's see, I got those items. Again, there's the swords. I'll get the spells. We'll get them from Apocalypse, and we'll get some stuff from the teleport spells. So there's some spells. And choose another mod, and we can do Apocalypse. Oh, there's a bunch of spells. I don't know why it's taking a second. Gimme your spells. There's a million spells in there. It's like the biggest spell mod I think there is. Love city life. I had to wait for a siren to pass. So now we got all these cool spells and we got all these cool items. So let's update our script. So it's just going to put all of those form IDs into our JSON file, which we can keep as is, or we could totally delete everything in it, whatever. I'll keep it as is and we'll clean it up afterwards. So we want to say like record all items in JSON and like record all spells in JSON, because then we're going to have the mod give the player a random one. So we'll just make these real quick. We'll just say all items and all spells in JSON. Let's see, event, or function rather. Function, end function, Come on, girl, do this quickly. And these will both take a string for the JSON file. So we'll just give them a file name. And I should show you how to update that file name. Like where, show how to place this into data my folder. Do that before we bail. So let's record all of the items. This one should be pretty easy because we just get all of the player's items. So we could pass along the actor, caster if we want to too. Although we know it's the player. Whatever. Cool. So how do we do the all items? This one's pretty easy. We just get the total number of items of the player, and then we loop through them, and we'll just add them to some list. So we'll just say the key that we're going to put in the JSON equals items. This one will be called spells. Can we not call it key? Key's the name of something, like an actual key. So I'll say JSON key. For this one, we'll say int count equals caster or player dot get num items. For the spells, we'll say int count equals caster get num. Let's see, how do you get the number of spells? Spell count. Get spell count. Okay, so those are the counts, and then we'll just say index equals 0, and then we'll loop. So while index is less than count, and while, and we'll index and equals 1, and then we will add the items to the list. So what we're going to do is we're going to say we'll just do weapons. So I'm going to say weapon. The weapon equals caster get nth form, which is how to get an item, index as weapon. And if it's not a weapon, it will be none, like null. So then we can just say if the weapon, because it won't exist if it was like armor. Then we'll say JsonUtil form list add the JSON file, the JSON key, the weapon. And then in this one, we'll say the spell equals caster get nth spell index. And then we'll say JsonUtil form list add JSON file, JSON key, the spell. Cool. Identifying index. Cool. That's what we're gonna do, and I think we should be good. And then we save it. So let's try and Control S to save that, and let's go into game. I want to do reload script. Gimme spell effect script. Let's cast the spell. The Sky UI, when I pull up the spells, can be weird. I don't know what's up with my Sky UI. And it should say saved gimme. So let's go take a look see. What is in there? Gimme. Cool. Nice. Check this out. So under the form list, what we get is a bunch of form IDs for weapons that we have from Skyrim, like our dagger, our bow, or whatever that we get by default. Then we have these two Belsky swords that we took from add item menu, and then we have these two standalone swords. And from the spells, we've got a bunch of stuff. We've got some things from Dragonborn, a bunch of things from Apocalypse that we clicked on. These are the teleport spells that we pulled in, and these are probably healing and flames from Skyrim. There's probably some underlying spells like racial spells or something that these dragon ones are. I don't know why we have these extra spells, but it's unrelated to what we're doing. And the key here was called spells, and the key here was called items. So we totally want to. You can see how at this point, once you've got this kind of loaded up, now you can feel comfortable editing this by hand. And if you want to, you could go in and open up some mods in like SSE Edit or Creation Kit, look at their form IDs and start adding them. So I'm just going to get rid of everything that is from like Dragonborn or Skyrim. We don't need this many Apocalypse spells. Let's do like a couple of them. Let's get rid of everything else. Oh, Gimme Gimme was there because we have the Gimme Gimme spell. That's kind of funny. So here are our spells and items. So now what we want to do is we could make a list of all of the possible mods that we want to check for. That would be a string list because we want to check for like blah.esp, blah.esp, or ESL or whatever. And we'll just loop through that list of strings, and for each one, if it's installed, we'll give the player some random items. How's that sound? So now we're at the point where we kind of feel comfortable with this file. Feel comfortable enough that we can say string list and if we look at the other ones, it says, let's add a comma there. It says like form list, and then it opens up this thing, and then you put the keys under there. So we can make a string list called mod names. Keep this underscore, keep this lowercase. Let's just use lowercase across the board. And we'll say, this is a list, so we'll just grab these. Let's say item mods and spell mods. So those values can be a normal casing. And then spell mods. And JSON is actually pretty flexible. You don't need the space here and stuff like that. You don't need to be super duper OCD about it. And now we'll take these two. I don't want that Dawnguard one. We don't need so many of them. Spell mods. And we'll delete this part. And this part. Cool. So we edited this ourselves. Let's see if this works. We're going to loop through the string lists for items and mods, and then we'll loop through all of the item and mods, item and spell mods, see if they're installed, and if they are, we'll just grab like a random item. So it feels like a lot, but and now we know how to work with these JSON files, and there's all those extra methods on them, like getting the count of the list and things like that. What you're going to find is there's going to be a moment in time where you say to yourself, oh jeepers creepers, I want to find out what the count of this list that I'm working with is, or I want to get the first item or get the last item, stuff like that. And in those cases you will use those functions. So just open up the JsonUtil.psc file from PapyrusUtil and read that file. Or if you're using an editor that has auto-completion, just type JsonUtil dot and read what comes after. Right, so that recorded all of the items. We didn't need to use the game for that. We totally could have done this ourselves using SSE Edit. Right, all we need to do is the ESP name on the right, and then these are the form IDs that we get from SSE Edit or Creation Kit or wherever. So now, let's say loop through the we'll say string array item mod names equals, and then we'll just do And I'll show you how to change where the file goes last. I should have shown you first, but I want to finish this and be done with it. We've spent a while on this. Longer than we probably needed to spend on this episode. Probably means fewer people will click into this episode. So that's kind of a bummer, but I want to show you this in practice, not just show you how to use all the functions, because then you'll be lost and not know how to maybe use it. So item spell names equals, and we can say JsonUtil dot, see, this is a string array, so string array, string list to array. We can grab these keys that we made called item mods and spell mods, and we can do from the file name get all of the item mods. Oops. And then we can get a string array of the spell mods. And so that one was spell mods. These forms could actually all be the same. The items and spells, those don't need to be separate. And the way I probably would have designed this is I would have designed it like this. I would have said Belsky swords. See what I'm doing here? Comma. I would have said this. I'm not sure about that whole casing thing, but it's bitten me in the past, so I think in the file it needs to be lowercase, but you can use uppercase in your code if you want to. Comma. Apocalypse. I can put it on that one, doesn't matter. Cool. And then we could just say mods. Mod names. Mod names. So what we'll do is, for every mod that you have installed, if you have it installed, then we'll get a form list with the name of the mod, and we'll get all of the items, and we'll just give you a random one. So there's the mod names, and so int index equals 0, that's how we loop, while the index is less than mod names dot length, and while index at equals 1, string mod name equals, we could put this in a separate function if we wanted to. We could just call it give player random items from installed mods file name. Function give player string JSON file. Just organize it a little bit better. Okay, this is JSON file now, and the key now is just called mod names. Promise once you get used to this, JSON key. string mod name equals mod names index, because we got a list of these. We basically have this, so we're looping over them. So let's grab the mod name, so like this one, and so for that one we're going to see is it installed, and if so we're going to grab all of the forms and we can add them to the player. We can see if it's a weapon or a spell. So we'll say string mod name equals, and then we'll say if mod is installed, and we'll make that mod name. So mod is installed is easy. We'll make a boolean function for whether or not the mod is installed. String mod name. Spelling girl. You just return whether or not game.getMod by name mod name isn't 255. It's weird. You can just read the documentation for get mod name. It'll give you the index in the install order, but if it's not in the install order, then it'll give you 255. So if mod is installed, then form random form equals get random form from mod, and we'll say JSON file mod name. So let's do form function get random form from mod string JSON file string mod name and function. So we need to return a form, a random one, so we just get it from whatever this key is. So we get a form list with the same name as the mod. So we'll say form array the forms equals JsonUtil dot form array, so form list to array, the JSON file, the key for this is actually the name of the mod, so mod name, and yeah, that should be it. And then we'll get a random form. So we need a number between 0 and the length of this array, how many forms there are. But if there's 5 things, it'll return the number 5, but there won't be an item at index 5. It's really index 4 because it's 0 base, not 1 base. So we say int form index random form index equals utility dot random int from 0 to the form's length, but then we have to subtract 1 so that it's 0 and not, it needs to be 4 instead of 5 if there's 5 things in there. And then you know, say if the form's length is greater than 0, then we'll do this stuff. If there are any forms, we'll get a random one, and we're just going to return the forms at that random form index. Cool, so now we have a random form, and we can see if it's a spell or a weapon. There's 2 ways we could do that. We could use the SKIC function random form get type, which returns an type code. We can also be really lazy and hacky, and we'll say spell the spell equals random form as spell, weapon the weapon equals random form as weapon, if the spell, else if the weapon, because those won't return if it's not a spell or if it's not a weapon. So if it's a spell, then we'll add to the caster. Then we'll do game.getPlayer down here, whatever. We don't need to use the caster. Actor player equals game get player. It's a lot, y'all, but it's so easy, but It's, I know it shows you a lot of code, and I don't like doing that. Otherwise, player dot add item, the weapon, and we'll say debug notification, gifted you a random item from end modding. We'll say random spell, random weapon. Oof, does it compile? Cool, back in game. Let's reload this script. Cast it. Look at the upper left. Gifted you a random weapon, gifted you a random weapon, gifted you a random spell, gifted you blah. We already have them, so it's not as exciting. But what we can do is we could totally, at this point now, we could go in. We don't need to save anything about the JSON file. We just do this. The file name, by the way, you could make like .././../gimme, and then it'll put you in data/gimme, because by default it's an SKSE plugin, some subfolder. So this gets you out of the subfolder, this gets you out of plugins, and this gets you out of SKSE. But that's not where we saved it. So if you save it there, that's where you can get it. So build this. Let's go in as a new player. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to disable the teleport spells, and I'm going to disable the steel swords. So now when we launch the game, we should only get a random weapon from Belsky, and we should get a random spell from Apocalypse. And when we jump into the game, our players shouldn't have any of those because we didn't add them. We just used the adding to test out how to make that form. We don't even need these add spell menu and add item menu things anymore. So if we look at our spells, this is all we have. If we look at our items, this is all we have. Okay, let's cast our spell. You've got a Belsky sword, and you got Azure Reconstruction. Cool. Let's cast it again. We got another Belsky sword. What do we get from Apocalypse this time? Ooh, Atronach Mark. We got something different. So now we have Azure Reconstruction and Atronach Mark, and we also have two Belsky swords. They're actually different ones. That's it. That's it. That's it. That's it. Here's what our JSON file looked like at the end. That's what we made, and we ended up kind of handwriting it, right? We added some mods that our mod integrates with, and then what we did was we looped over those mods in our case, and then we just automatically said, hey, for this mod, we've got some files or whatever. We've got some forms. They could be spells, they could be spell tomes, they could be armor, they could be NPCs, anything that has a form identifier, which is almost everything in the game. Global variable, whatever. And then this was our code in the end. Gotcha, when you look up these things, use, or when you write them in the JSON file, use lowercase. That just randomly bit me. Yeah, y'all. I think this went 32 minutes plus. I recorded before, which was 21. So 50, geez, almost an hour. I'm so sorry. I could do like a 15-minute episode that just shows you like, here's some functions and here's how to call them, although I'm not really showing you how to call them. Just here's some functions. Good luck. But this is how I actually use it. This is how I like to use it. I like to end up handwriting those JSON files. If you don't want to handwrite them, or if you don't know how, go use JsonUtil, add some stuff to it with just JsonUtil, cast a spell like we did, and it'll generate the file for you. And then now that you've got the file, you're totally comfortable editing it. All you need to do is change the form ID and the name of the mod, and you're kind of golden. So this is how I love to use it. I love to use it for integration with other mods. Use it for whatever the hell you want. It's just JSON files. You can store structured data. Good luck with it. Have fun with it. And happy modding. Maybe tell me what you use it for down in the comments below. All right. Happy modding, everyone.